Welcome to Behind the Book, a series on author notes where historical fiction authors share the inspiration, research, and stories behind their novels. Today, I'm joined by historical fiction author Glynis Peters to talk about her latest novel, The Orphan's Mission. Some historical fiction begins with a forgotten moment from the past, a small piece of history that quietly opens the door to a much larger story. And in this conversation, Glynis shares the historical inspiration behind the novel, the premise of the story, and the research and themes that stayed with her long after the writing was done. Let's step behind the book. What nugget of history inspired the story?
What nugget of history inspired the story? It was the interest in the French resistance, and I researched so heavily, and I wanted to know what made people come together to start a resistance when they'd been so heavily beaten in France. And I wondered what made these people want to put themselves forward and their lives at risk to try and beat such a vast enemy. And who created the French resistance? How did it happen? How did people come together? How did they meet in secret? Because again, that's putting themselves in danger. And why put themselves in danger? Because somebody could tell on them and turn them over. So, yeah, the French resistance that drew me in, and then the history from my hometown was the submarines I didn't realise were docked there in Harwich, and there were French speakers and French sailors. So all of this was like, oh, hang on, I don't know, why were they there? Well, now I know why they were there, but where can I go with this? And then I thought, okay, I can go with this into the French resistance. I can bring this little idea together. But it wasn't the French resistance, it was the pre-French resistance. So I think that's, yeah, these little things inspire.
What is the story's premise?
The story's premise is Lucy Levine is a young girl in her late teens, and she's born in the town that I was born in Harwich and Dovercourt, in the UK, and she is sent to her grandmother after she'd got a French-speaking father, and her mother and is English. Her father was killed just on the cusp of the start of the war, and then her mother disappeared, and she was sent to a grandmother in Coventry who didn't like her actions, didn't like her behaviour, and she wanted her to go to an aunt down in Portsmouth, Plymouth way, but she didn't. Lucy ran away from Croydon in London back to her hometown in Dovercourt. Here she hears the French-speaking sailors saying nice things about her when she returns back, and she responds in French, and they're taken aback by this. Anyway, she realises she no longer has a home there because there is no one, and she goes to a friend for help. They can only help so much, and she's a very vulnerable young woman. and she meets one of these French sailors. Now, not for romance or anything like that at all. He was a married man, and he was telling her about what had happened in France, and he wanted to know how come she could speak French so well. So they had this conversation, and a few days later, a young man approaches her at the house where she's staying, and he asks if he can meet with her. He has a proposition, and she told the Frenchman she would like to find out somehow what had happened to her father and her mother, whether she'd got family in France at all, where she could go to somebody, because her life with her grandmother and her aunt didn't exist anymore. So he had obviously spoken with somebody who drew her in on her vulnerability, basically, asked her to take a message, but it got to be delivered in France. And he said that she would be alone, but he could help try and get her there. So Lucy agrees to this, and alone she has to get from Harwich through to the Hook of Holland, and where we live, we are the gateway to Europe. So we are our ships and boats go out to the Hook of Holland. So I knew that point, so I used that point. So she smuggled out, and then she has to get herself from the Hook of Holland to an airfield, and the Germans are coming, and she has about 20 minutes to learn how to jump out of a plane. And so therefore she has this very literally crash course. And when she does jump out of the plane over France, she lands in a tree, and her parachute is entangled in the tree. And then a Frenchman, who is actually a French Canadian, although he lives permanently in France, he's the one who's supposed to receive her and has to get her down from the tree. So so that was quite an amusing thing. So then really the life starts from there. He knows things that he doesn't realize he knows. She's asking the questions that she doesn't realize that he's got the answer to, or might have the answer to. So it's all entwined. And yes, it all comes to a head. So, but she meets this small pocket of people, delivers her message, has a small pocket of people that she ends up relying on, becoming part of a family, and they do become a little family unit. And that's where the story takes off in France.
What do you hope readers take away from the story?
I hope they take away that despite all the darkness that goes on around them, and all the devastation, anything that's happening, that hope and love are the stronghold of getting through and surviving. That's what I hope a reader takes from it, that there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and no matter how dark and how devastating things get, you can get through the other side and come out triumphant.
Is there a favorite line from the novel that resonates with you?
Dear Emily, hanging by one leg from a parachute was not how I imagined would be the way I met a handsome Frenchman, and yet here I am. I like that one. I like that very much. I loved writing that. I had this vision, this poor girl upside down. I mean, you don't expect to present yourself to a handsome Frenchman. So yes. And yeah, that was the line that Emily liked very much. Sorry, it became a little thing in my head that I kept going with all the way through the book, not making that statement, but all the time that was leading me to the epilogue of the book, because I then knew she is an artist. She wanted to be an artist like her mother. And I then knew what I wanted the epilogue to be, and what her future, just the ending, would be. So yeah. But I did like writing that.
Thank you so much, Glynis, for sharing the story behind the Orphan's mission. It's always fascinating to hear how pieces of history can be transformed into stories that feel both deeply personal and emotionally resonant. And for those of you watching, I hope this conversation has offered a deeper glimpse into the layers behind historical fiction, the research, the questions, and the moments that continue to linger long after the final page. If the Orphan's mission has sparked your curiosity, you can find it at your favorite bookstore or through your local public library. If you enjoy stepping behind the books you read, you'll find more conversations like this here on Author's Notes.